Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. In today's video, I've got 5 really shabby chic projects and I can't wait to share them with you and show you some ordinary pieces that are now extraordinary. So the first project is actually that little pink guitar that's right up at the top of the screen. And it was my granddaughter's Minnie Mouse guitar. And so she doesn't know that I'm doing this. And so I spray painted it actually with Rust-Oleum Blush Pink because I figure with all of like the little twists and turns on it, it was just easier to spray it than try to paint over it. So now I'm going to be putting a lot of different molds on the front. So I started with the classic elements and down at the bottom, and then I'm working my way up around the side of the face of that guitar with different pieces from the IOD Olive Crest. There are 2 pieces that are symmetrical, that are kind of swirly, that I'll put on either side, and then I will use those little parentheses to put right there in the middle. So I get them all put on with Titebond Thick and Quick, and once it's all dry, then I'm going to go back on the back side and I'm going to use the IOD Rose Toile stamp. And I kind of wiggle it around and I use, I think, stone gray ink because I don't want it to be too bright. And that's just a little tool that I got off of Amazon that I use with some really big stamps. Now the part that I forgot to click on the video is I would pick up that stamp or some of the smaller pieces of the rose toile, and I would stamp around the little part where you put your hand up at the top of the guitar, whatever that is called. So I'll show it to you in just a minute. Now look at this mold. It's really strange, and I found this, I think, off of Etsy, and it's just like a really plastic mold, but it's a fairy mold, and I was able to make some of those with DOS air dry clay. And I put those on the side of this little tote. And then on the face of it, or the front of it, then I used the Conservatory Labels to make the mold out of. And then I stamped my granddaughter's initial into that clay with the Apothecary Labels. And then on one side, if you'll notice, I had one of the little girls from the Fairy Merry Christmas that I put on the side, that transfer. But that tote has been sitting around for a pretty good while. And so that's why a lot of it was already finished. And I painted that with actually Dixie Belle Tea Rose. So right here you can see all of that ink all along the sides. And then that little piece up at the top, that came from the Swags mold. And it was just something I had in my stash, and it was made with resin. And that'll be like the little guitar pick. And after I painted these molds on the tote, then I used white wax, just kind of finish them off and to show that detail. But these are just some ordinary pieces that I turned into extraordinary pieces. So what do you think? And look at that stamp on the back. I just think it's beautiful. I love the way it turned out. I wasn't real sure. And then on the front of the guitar, the part where the little strings are at, whatever that's called, I did not put anything on that because I would have had to slide a little stamp up underneath it, and I figured it would kind of smear. So that's going to stay plain. But I can't wait for my granddaughter to see it and tell me what she thinks. So you will see now what is on the side of that tote, that little fairy mold that I used. But my granddaughters all are in princess and fairies and all of that sort of stuff. So I think they'll really like this one. But I think it's really pretty. But that mold was pretty flimsy, and I was really surprised that it held up as good as it did. And now when I show you the other end of the tote, I used the transfer from this past Christmas, Fairy Merry Christmas, and I used a transfer of a little girl with curly hair, and my granddaughter has curly hair, even though it's blonde. So I think she's really going to like this tote. And actually, this is a thrifted tote that I found, and it's not really heavy. So if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel and become part of our family. So my next piece is one of those things that you can thrift, and it looks like a scroll, and it's got those little finials up at the top on the side. And so I painted it with Waverly Moss Green because that's one of my favorite colors right now. And then once again, I pulled out my Rose Toile stamp because I wanted to just give a little bit of extra interest before I started putting the different molds on it. And I just kind of used it here and there. And then there's some other smaller pieces that I used on those little areas that didn't get covered. And I used the IOD black ink on this one. And because this paint is already dark, if I had used stone gray ink on it, it wouldn't have shown up at all. And then those just extra little spots, I will use those little extra pieces to kind of fill that in. And if you've been with my channel for a while, you're going to remember that I did a really similar project with these kind of little frames that I'm going to be putting on here. And so this time I'm going to be using just lots of different little frames that I've made up. And some are IOD, some are Redesign with Prima, and some are just some of those little molds that you'll find on Etsy. And I like frames a lot, and so I always make extra ones just so I'll have them on hand. So I painted all of them with Rust-Oleum Chiffon Cream, and then I'm going to go back and I'm using the DIY gilding wax, and I don't put it on really heavy, but it's just enough to put some gold on it. And some of the pieces or some of the frames are bigger and some are really small. And then the 3 IOD frames, they have the little part in the middle where the other ones were actually just frames. So they're going to be a little bit easier to finish off than the ones that just have the frame itself with no backing on it. And I'll try to link those extra frames in the description box. But a lot of times when I want those kind of unusual stamps, then I'll like to look on Etsy because there's always just a lot of different kind of things that you can get. And some of them are those little pink molds that people use with cake decorating. And most of these are made out of resin, but I believe this one in particular is made out of hot glue. Now, before I actually put them on this little green scroll, I've actually already kind of laid them out and decided how I wanted to put them, and I took a picture of it with my phone so that I could remember. But I believe there's 9 different frames, and some are bigger and some are smaller. Because when you're decorating, it just is more pleasing to the eye to do things in uneven numbers. So now gets the tricky part. So especially with those little frames that don't have a back to it. But I'm going to do the easy ones first. So I just made them out with paper on my printer, and I got these graphics off of Etsy, and it's just a lot of Victorian women. So because I used paper instead of rice paper, just to make it easier to get on that little rounded surface, I just took that little piece of paper that's just got the lady's face on it, and I just kind of wadded it up a little bit and then opened it back up. And then just having those little wrinkles in it helped kind of pull it over those little rounded surfaces. And then I just kind of run my fingernail around the edge. And after it dries, then I'll go back with like a little X-Acto knife to cut off that extra. But because the IODs already have that middle part of it, those were much easier to do. Now on the ones that did not have a back, that was strictly just the frame, well, those were kind of a booger to do, I'm telling you. And I tried to do a lot of different faces, and so I would just already kind of laid it on top of those faces to know how much to cut. And then I'd trim it down, and then I would put glue or Mod Podge glue on the back of it, and then I would lay that paper on top of it. But I think they turned out really cute. And I will link in the description box below the link to this Etsy shop. But they're just all Victorian women. And the pictures actually are in color, but the colors are pretty muted, and so they don't interfere with the green on that little scroll. And then this is just a little tool. It's not an X-Acto knife, but I like it better. And by this point, that paper has dried, and so it makes it easier to trim it off. And especially with this being resin, I know I'm not going to mess it up at all. And then I pull out my Titebond Thick and Quick, and that's what I use to put these little frames on. And I've already kind of got off to the side my other phone, and I've got that little picture pulled up just so I can know where I want to put them. And then I stagger them, and on one side I'll do like a square frame, and then on the other side I'll put something that's more rounded, and just kind of go back and forth like that, just so that to add a little bit of extra interest to it. Now, on those little scrolls, I know they're already painted gold, but they're much darker than what I want. So I'm going to paint them white, and then I'm going to go back with that gilding wax to go back over it, because if I had tried to just put gilding wax on it to tone it down, it would not have matched up with the frames a lot. And the little ribbon braid, I taped it down while I was working on it. And here's the final project, and I just think it's beautiful. So what do you think? Okay, so the next two projects are for my older granddaughter. So I'm going to be using the Juliette mold, which is that really big piece of continuing roses. But I'm going to be making it out of resin to put on this particular project. So I didn't want that resin to kind of drain into all of the roses. So I kind of played around with it a little bit to know where I wanted it to be. And I used hot glue to kind of make a little barrier on those molds so that I wouldn't kind of run all into it and waste my resin. And I use amazing casting resin that sets up in 5 minutes. And it's really easy. It's part A that's clear. Part B is kind of a yellow color. And you pour equal amounts in it, stir it up, and then you need to be ready to pour it right then, because it sets up so quickly. But I need the molds that I'm going to be putting on this project to be more sturdy, because later on she may decide that she doesn't want to keep those on there. And then now that it's all set up, then I pull that little hot glue off. And it just pops right out. And with resin, you don't have to put cornstarch in the mold. Now, this is actually a mold that I've had made for a long time. And it's a Zuri mold, and it's this woman, and she's holding a big bouquet of flowers. And I actually made it with that medium called Flex Compound, I think, or Form Flex. And it's quite expensive, and I tried it, and I liked it, but it takes a good while for it to set up. So I just kind of had it sitting around until I decided I was ready for it. Okay, so let me tell you about this tote. It's made out of purple heart wood. And when I made it for my granddaughter, she was a little disappointed because she didn't think it looked purple enough. So I've been having it at my house just trying to decide what to do with it. So I decided since the younger one was getting a tote, then I would decorate her tote so that she would have one too. So that Juliette mold is on one end and that the mold with the woman holding the bouquet on the other end. And on the front of it, I'm once again using the Conservatory label. And I will not be using the Apothecary label right now, only because I'm not going to put her initial on it until after this video is complete, just for privacy reasons. But they're all really sturdy, and then later on, if she doesn't want them on there, it really isn't going to be any problem because I can still sand it down because this wood is actually this color. Now, I struggled with what to do as to how to paint all of these, and at first I painted them with Rust-Oleum chiffon cream, and I thought they looked kind of boring. So I asked my mom what she thought, and so she thought maybe I could use a purple on it, and I wasn't real sure. So I went through my Dixie Bowl paints, and I found this paint that's a gray color, but it's got sort of a purple undertone. And I am so sorry, but I cannot remember the name of it, and I can't find my little bottle of paint as well. But if you're used to using Dixie Belle, it's just a really pretty gray that does have those purple undertones. So what I decided to do is I started off painting the roses with this gray, and then I took a baby wipe and I wiped it back so that color would only kind of sink into the details. And I only would do just a little bit at one time and wipe it back because I knew that if I let it sit on there too long, that it's not going to come off very well. And because that mold is sitting straight on that little tote, I didn't even bother to try to paint the little sides of those molds, only because with me wiping it back, it's already going to look a little distressed. And in a minute, when you see the final reveal, it's going to look a lot more purple in the final reveal than it actually is. And I think it was just from the light showing up on it. So I hope she likes this. But the reason I made it for initially was because it was called Purple Heart Wood. And that wood is not cheap. So I was a little disappointed that she didn't like it at first. So she's going to be at my house this week. So I'm interested to see what she's going to say about it. Now I use the same color on this mold right here, but I only use it on her dress. And on this one, I really like the way it turned out. It kind of sunk into the folds of her dress, and I just think it made it look so much more elegant like that. And then I went back and I painted the leaves on this other side with a Dixie Belle green color, and once again wiped it back with like a little baby wipe just so it would look really distressed. And on those branches that are on there, I didn't bother to try to paint those brown. I'm just going to paint all of that green, just so that I won't have just a ton of different colors on one side. And on that mold, that's the little girl, I painted her flowers pink. And then I think I painted her hair kind of a yellow because my granddaughter has blonde hair. So I'll show it to you in just a minute. But if you watched my video last week, do you remember the tray that messed up really bad and the transfer colors bled onto it? Well, I scraped all that off and I was determined I was going to use it this week. So this is some decoupage paper from Decoupage Central. And so I had already gone back and painted it all white again. And then I just laid that piece of decoupage paper on it. And I laid it to where I wanted to make sure that the particular flowers were on there. And then I cut all around it. And I'm just using Mod Podge. And I put a little bit on. And then I lay that paper down. And then I keep working all the way down. And then I use a stamp from Rose Toile down at the base of it. But here is the final project. So what do you think? So friends, we are at the end of the video, and here are all of my final pieces today. So in the comments below, tell me, what do you think? Which one is your favorite? But I'm excited for my granddaughters to see all of these because they really do love pink and purple. And with this little guitar, I'm kind of wondering what my granddaughter is going to say about it. And I'll have to show her how to use that little pick just to show her how to strum it with. Even though I don't know how to play a guitar, at least I know how they do it. So we shall see. So friends, as we finish up, I want to thank all of you who entered for the Boughs of Holly set of resin molds, and I thank you so much for all of your support. So once again, if you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Have a good week.